I stood in the doorway of the guest house, rain dripping through the thin eaves, while laughter spilled from the main house I used to call mine. Be grateful for the space we gave you, my son had said, as if I hadn't built every wall, paid every bill, planted every rosebush in that yard. Guest, they called me. Guest, in the very home where I raised him. But what they forgot is this: guests can leave, owners can sell, and I was still the owner. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Steam curled above the chipped lip of Maggie's coffee mug, a fading blue pattern of vines barely visible anymore. She stood by the narrow window of her guest house, the kind meant for overflow guests or a storage shed, not the woman who once owned the very house it stood behind. From this angle, she could just make out the edge of the patio. Glasses clinked. Laughter floated through the breeze like glitter she couldn't wipe off. Tina's voice rose above the rest, sharp, performative, as if the brunch was being held on stage. "Can you believe how tiny this mimosa spoon is?" Tina trilled. A chorus of polite laughter followed. Maggie took a sip of lukewarm coffee, then set the mug down on the small kitchenette counter. There wasn't enough space in this cozy detached unit, as Evan had once described it to a neighbor. No oven. A mini fridge that wheezed at night, and insulation so poor that in winter she wore 2 pairs of socks indoors. The porch door creaked, and Maggie turned just in time to see Toby's face appear through the screen. 16. All limbs and empathy. He didn't come in, just lifted a hand in a shy wave before ducking back out toward the main house. Maggie smiled faintly, her chest tightening. Of all of them, Toby saw her. But even he had limits, an unspoken line between affection and allegiance. Her phone buzzed, a text from Evan. "Hope the noise isn't too much. Enjoy the space we gave you." No punctuation after "you," she noticed. The heart emoji felt like vinegar on a paper cut. She didn't reply. Instead, she walked slowly to the guesthouse closet, only deep enough for one season's wardrobe, and pulled down the metal lockbox she kept behind a stack of old editing manuscripts. Her fingers moved automatically, dialing the 4-digit code. Click. Inside, insurance papers, birth certificates, her late husband's Navy discharge form, and a thick file folder labeled in her own handwriting, "House, Legal Transfer." She took it to the small dining table, really just a side table someone had tried to market as multi-use, and laid the papers out in deliberate order. The original deed transfer. Evan's signature. Tina's, too, scrawled in that upward loop she used like a brand. Maggie's own neat print. And there it was, underlined twice in blue ink. Life estate retained by grantor. She had insisted on that clause, even when Evan called it a legal dinosaur. Just for peace of mind, she had said back then. But even then, she'd known. Mothers always know. A gust of wind lifted the corner of the paper, brushing it toward the edge. Maggie pressed it back down with her palm. From the yard, someone popped a bottle of champagne. More laughter. The sound splintered inside her head like a dropped glass. She stood and walked to the window again, this time not bothering to stay out of view. Tina was posing for a photo with 2 other women, all of them holding flutes, one of them sitting in Maggie's old rocking chair. The one Evan said didn't fit the new look. Maggie felt her jaw tighten. Her guest house had no laundry, so she hauled her clothes to the main house once a week, like a tenant. She was expected to ask permission before trimming her own rose bushes. Tina had once passive-aggressively left an air freshener on the guest house porch, just in case the mustiness is bothering you. Maggie took a breath. Deep, steady. Not today. She returned to the table and refolded the documents with surgical care. Slipped them back into the folder, then back into the box. She locked it, returned it to its hiding spot, and stood for a moment in the center of the tiny room, absorbing the silence between bursts of laughter outside. Then she reached for her phone again, not to reply to Evan, but to scroll through her contacts. She paused at one name, Frank Coulter, and tapped call. Frank Coulter's office smelled faintly of cedar and paper, old paper, the kind Maggie used to edit back when manuscripts arrived in boxes instead of inboxes. The walls were lined with Oregon landscape prints and neatly framed law degrees. A brass lamp cast a pool of amber light over the conference table where Maggie laid the folder like evidence. Frank adjusted his glasses, peering down at the deed with the care of a surgeon over a chart. "You kept everything," he murmured, flipping one page, then another. "Impressive, but not surprising." Maggie sat upright in the leather chair opposite him, spine stiff but not brittle. 30 years of editing contracts for publishing houses, she said evenly. "You learn to keep the footnotes, not just the headlines." Frank chuckled low in his throat. "Well, you gave them the house, but—" He tapped the underlined clause with his pen. "You retained a life estate. That's gold." The words hung in the air like a door swinging open. Maggie watched the pen tip trace the clause she had insisted on all those years ago. It felt less like a technicality now, and more like a loaded key. Frank leaned back, lacing his fingers over his stomach. "Translation. You still have full legal right to use it, or sell it, during your lifetime. They can't stop you, Maggie, even if they try." A slow, deliberate smile ghosted across her lips. "They forgot I edited contracts for 30 years, she said, her voice softer now, almost amused. "They're used to skimming." Frank gave her a long, appraising look. "I can file a notice or start prepping a listing discreetly. We don't have to tip them off until the ink's dry." She shook her head, sliding the folder back toward herself. "I already have someone in mind." He raised an eyebrow. "Someone you trust?" "Yes," she said simply, but her tone carried weight. "And someone who still owes me a favor." Outside the window, Ben's fall sky was iron gray, clouds dragging low over the Cascades. Maggie traced a vein of wood in the table, letting her thoughts run like water between stones. For the first time in months, the tight band around her chest had loosened a fraction. Frank leaned forward, voice lower. "You're sure about this?" "They think they've done me a kindness," Maggie replied. "But I've been living like a boarder on my own land. This isn't kindness. This is convenience." He nodded slowly. "If you go through with it, they'll be blindsided." "They blindsided me first," she said, and for a moment her eyes flicked toward the window as if she could see, across town, the Guesthouse's peeling doorframe and the brunch party still in full swing. Frank studied her for another beat, then reached for a yellow legal pad. "All right, quiet listing, no signage, private showings. We'll keep your name out of it until we're ready." Maggie rose, smoothing the front of her cardigan. "I don't want to look like the villain here, Frank." "You're not," he said simply. "You're the owner." She slipped the folder into her tote bag, the snap of the clasp sounding like punctuation at the end of a long, unread sentence. "Gimme a week," she said, already turning toward the door. "Then I'll call Leah." Frank's pen hovered over the pad. "Leah Ramirez? The agent?" Maggie glanced back, one hand on the doorframe. "She was my intern once. Bright girl. She'll know how to keep this quiet." Frank let out a low whistle. This is going to be something. Maggie didn't smile this time. She pulled her scarf tighter, stepped into the hallway, and let the cool corridor air fill her lungs. For the first time in a long while, she felt taller. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a new message from an unsaved number. She hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen as she stepped into the elevator. The doors slid shut, trapping her in a small box of mirrored steel. On the display, 4 words appeared. We need to talk. She frowned. No name, no context. The elevator descended, each floor number blinking like a countdown. Maggie spotted her the moment the cafe door opened. The dark waves of hair, sharp blazer, and an energy that hadn't dimmed since her intern days. Leah Ramirez scanned the room, eyes sharp but warm, and when she saw Maggie, her whole face lit up. "Maggie Holt," she said, sliding into the booth like no time had passed. "You look good." "You still know how to lie well?" Maggie said, smiling. "That bodes well for what I'm about to ask you." Leah gave her a long look, then reached across the table and wrapped her in a firm, no-nonsense hug. "Whatever it is, I'm in. I owe you more than one career leap." "I might just be collecting on all of them at once," Maggie said. They ordered coffees, black for Maggie, oat milk latte for Leah, and as the clatter of plates and espresso machines filled the air, Maggie laid out the situation with the precision of a seasoned editor. No dramatics, no exaggerations, just facts, names, and the timeline that brought her from the main house to the guest house to this table. Leah listened, her brow furrowing deeper with each sentence. When Maggie quoted Evan's text, "Hope the noise isn't too much. Enjoy the space we gave you," Leah's nostrils flared. "They really said that to you?" she asked, voice low and sharp. "They did a lot more than say things," Maggie replied. "They redefined gratitude until it meant invisible." Leah let out a quiet breath, then leaned forward. "All right, tell me what you want." "No signage," Maggie said. "No MLS, no flyers, no digital breadcrumbs they could stumble across." "Private showings only?" "Exactly, and only when they're gone. I can let you in through the garage." Leah raised an eyebrow. "Ballsy." "Calculated," Maggie corrected. "I'm not looking for drama. I'm looking for closure." Leah reached for her tablet, fingers moving across the screen. "I've got a few pre-qualified buyers who don't flinch at market price. I can vet them myself. Quiet, clean. We'll do everything through my private network." Maggie nodded. "I knew you'd know how." They sipped their coffees in silence for a moment. Outside, the wind nudged golden leaves along the sidewalk like forgotten confetti. "You okay with this?" Leah asked quietly. "Selling the house you built your life in?" Maggie considered that, turning the question over like a coin in her mind. "I gave that house up once already," she said. "This time, I'm taking something back." Leah tapped through to a digital document and swiveled the screen toward her. "Preliminary agreement. Just gets me on record as your agent, nothing binding about the final deal." Maggie took the stylus and signed without hesitation. Her signature came out crisp, confident. "God, I forgot how tidy your handwriting is," Leah said with a grin. "You edit like you live." "I live like they expect me not to notice what they're doing," Maggie replied. "That's about to change." Their waitress dropped off the check. Leah grabbed it before Maggie could reach. "Don't argue," she said. "You paid me in references and resume lines for 10 years. Maggie didn't argue. They stood outside beneath the awning, wind tugging at their coats. The scent of roasted beans and rain lingered in the air. "If this goes sideways," Leah said, "you call me first. Not Frank, not the bank. Me." Maggie met her eyes. "It won't go sideways." "Why not?" "Because I've already lived through the worst version of this," she said. "The one where I stayed quiet." They hugged again, shorter this time, but tighter. Leah disappeared down the street, tapping into her phone already, the wheels clearly turning. Maggie stayed where she was, one hand on the railing, eyes on the street. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. Same number as before. "You're making a mistake." The garage door lifted with a soft mechanical hum, the kind Maggie had once complained was too loud when Evan first installed it. Now she welcomed the sound. It masked the nervous thrum of her pulse. Leah crouched beside her at the keypad, whispering, "We've got 25 minutes. They're both at work?" Maggie nodded. "Tina has her Pilates and facial routine until noon. Evan's in meetings until 2. I checked their shared calendar." Leah looked impressed. "Remind me never to cross a book editor." Maggie offered a thin smile. "We make a living spotting what others miss." The couple stepped inside quietly behind them, Hannah and Marcus Claremont. Mid-40s, Portland transplants, recently liquid from a commercial real estate deal. They moved like people used to good design and better service, but without arrogance. "Wow," Marcus said, his voice low and reverent as they entered the kitchen. This is the kind of light you don't even get in brochures." Hannah ran her fingers along the waterfall quartz island. "Look at that view," she whispered, nodding toward the wide window that framed Mount Bachelor in the distance. Maggie stood back by the garage entrance, letting Leah lead the tour, the Claremonts unaware that the woman standing in the shadows was more than just a helpful neighbor with a key. Leah moved through the house with practiced ease. Fully renovated in the last 7 years. Energy-efficient windows, radiant heating in the floors, and the cellars replaced all the appliances in 2022. Smart home system included, but optional at close. Marcus grinned. "Cellars, huh? Sounds like they're not emotionally attached." Leah didn't flinch. "They're relocating. It's a quiet situation." In the living room, Tina's decor practically assaulted the senses. There were mirrored accent tables, a faux fur bench that screamed Instagram, and throw pillows stitched with phrases like "wifey for lifey" and "brunch bitch." Hannah made a face. "Well, the architecture's lovely." Leah smiled graciously. "All staging items will be removed before closing." Maggie smothered a laugh behind her fingers. They moved into the backyard, where the grass was sharp with the scent of early morning watering and trimmed edges. The Claremonts stood in awe beneath the cedar pergola Evan had built 2 summers ago, but rarely used. "This is a magazine spread," Marcus said, turning in place. "Are those Japanese maples?" "Yes," Maggie answered before she could stop herself. They turned toward her. Hannah blinked. "Oh, sorry, we didn't realize." "I'm just the caretaker," Maggie said smoothly. "I keep things tidy while the family's away." Leah didn't miss a beat. "And Maggie knows the history of the house better than anyone." They continued the tour upstairs, admiring the primary suite's view, the walk-in closet, the rainfall shower. Maggie lingered at the bottom of the stairs, her eyes drifting to a stack of unopened Amazon boxes in the hallway. Tina's latest obsession, judging by the labels, LED wine rack, and French macaron tower reusable. Upstairs, muffled footsteps and murmurs. Maggie leaned against the wall and closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of her old life, linen spray, polished wood, the faint trace of lavender from her long-gone diffuser. For a moment, her chest ached, but the ache passed. Leah led the couple back down. They were smiling, eyes bright. "We're interested," Marcus said. "Seriously interested." "We'll put together a strong offer," Hannah added. "Just keep it quiet for now. We don't want to spook anyone." Leah nodded. "That's exactly how we're handling it." They shook hands and disappeared out the side gate toward the alley where they'd parked. Maggie watched them go, heart pounding in the strange, heady cocktail of control and risk. "Yes," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "These are the ones." Leah turned to her, quiet for a moment. They didn't suspect a thing. "No one does," Maggie said, walking them both back toward the garage. "Not yet." Leah pulled out her phone to send a follow-up to the buyers. As she typed, Maggie noticed a flicker in her expression, something unreadable. "What is it?" Leah hesitated. "You said you got another text last time we spoke?" Maggie nodded. "Just 4 words. You're making a mistake. Leah looked up. You just got another one. Maggie blinked. How would you know? Leah held out her phone, showing her a message forwarded from her office line. Stop before it's too late. Maggie sat across from Leah at a corner table in Frank Coulter's office conference room, a neat stack of papers between them. Outside, Ben's late October rain streaked the windows like soft watercolor. Inside, the air smelled of printer toner and cedar polish, the scent of decisions becoming permanent. Frank skimmed the last page with his usual unhurried precision. I've seen tighter deals, he said. But not by much. You're not just selling a house, Maggie. You're cashing out a fortress. He looked up over his glasses. Rock solid. They won't be able to block it. Leah grinned faintly, but her eyes flicked once to Maggie as if to confirm she still wanted this. Maggie only nodded, her jaw set. The ink on the offer letter glistened faintly under the recessed lighting, like a warning or a promise. They'll find out soon enough, Frank continued. But by then, it'll be too late to stop. I'm counting on it, Maggie murmured, signing the final page. Her signature was clean and firm, no tremor, no second guessing. She slid the pen back across the table. Let's schedule the closing. Leah leaned over. Buyer's earnest money's already deposited. We're officially in escrow. 30-day close unless you want to push for faster. Maggie thought of the guest house. Its cold floors, the borrowed washer and dryer, the muted life she'd been living behind someone else's curtains. Faster, she said. The sooner the better. Frank nodded, tapping his calendar. Done. I'll prep the utility transfer notifications, property taxes, all the boring stuff. They'll get an official notice on closing day. Leah's phone buzzed once. She checked it quickly but said nothing. Maggie caught the micro-expression, a flicker of unease, but let it pass. Frank gathered the signed documents into a manila folder. So where will you go? A senior artist community near the coast, Maggie replied. They've got studios, sea light, classes. I put a deposit down this morning. Leah blinked. Already? Maggie shrugged lightly. When you've been planning your exit for years, the logistics don't take long. Frank chuckled. Remind me not to play chess with you. Maggie allowed herself the smallest smile. You'd lose in the first 3 moves. Back at the guest house that evening, Maggie began to pack. She moved deliberately, box by box, taking only what mattered. Her husband's Navy discharge papers, her own first edition books, 3 canvases she'd never found the courage to paint on. She left the air fresheners Tina had left on her porch, still in their wrappers. The wind rattled the guest house window. She closed it, sealing out the sound of Evan's landscaping crew blowing leaves across the yard. From the main house, faint music drifted. Tina's curated playlist of soft jazz and self-importance. Maggie taped another box shut and slid it toward the door. Her phone buzzed again. A new message from the unknown number. You think you're clever? She stared at it for a long beat, then tucked the phone face down into her apron pocket. Another knock, this one real, gentle. Mimi? Toby's voice, low and uncertain. She opened the door a crack. He stood there in a hoodie, rain on his hair. His eyes darted past her shoulder at the boxes stacked like bricks of an escape tunnel. Are you moving? He asked. Maggie forced a lightness she didn't feel. I'm sorting things. His brow furrowed. Dad doesn't know, does he? She shook her head, stepping aside just enough for him to see the room. Not yet, and I'd appreciate it if you kept it that way a little longer. He hesitated. You're not mad at me, right? Her throat tightened. Toby, sweetheart, I could never be mad at you. He nodded, eyes shiny. Okay. I'll help you load stuff if you want. She reached out and squeezed his hand briefly. I'll let you know. He left, shoulders hunched against the rain, glancing back once at the guest house door as though memorizing it. Maggie closed the door, exhaling slowly. The guest house felt smaller now with the boxes stacked high, but also lighter, like a stage after the last prop had been struck. On her phone, another message appeared from the unknown number, this time longer. If you go through with this, you'll regret it. The screen stayed lit in the dim room, casting a cold glow over the boxes. Maggie stared at it, then at the signed escrow documents resting on the table like a sealed verdict. Tina held a wine glass like it was an accessory, not a drink, elbow lifted just so, stem balanced between manicured fingers. She stood in the kitchen, gesturing at the cabinets like a reality show host who had just acquired her next project. I'm thinking navy blue lowers and brass pulls, she said brightly. Maybe open shelving over here once we knock that wall out. Evan leaned against the counter with a beer, amused. What happened to the French country idea? She scoffed. Please, everyone's doing that now. This place needs edge. It's just waiting for a glow-up. Maggie stood at the threshold between the mudroom and kitchen, arms folded, invisible as always. Tina didn't look her way. Didn't need to. Her voice had that chirpy pitch she used when she wanted to be overheard, not addressed. Maybe we do the remodel next spring, Tina said. Once the holidays settle down. Evan smirked. By then, we can turn the guest house into an Airbnb. College tourists would love a tucked-away little artist's cabin. Maggie smiled faintly, one corner of her mouth lifting with a restraint that had been decades in the making. The floor tile beneath her feet was one she had chosen 15 years ago, a matte gray ceramic with a slate trim Evan had once called boring. Now he called it neutral and timeless. Funny how words changed when ownership did. Well, Maggie said, her tone even, I suppose tourists do enjoy rustic discomfort. Tina blinked at her, the smile cracking. Sorry? Maggie gestured vaguely. No laundry, no oven, poor insulation. But sure, with the right marketing it's charming. Evan chuckled, missing the undercurrent entirely. Mom, don't be dramatic. It's a cute space. You've made it really livable. Maggie raised her coffee mug. Livable, she repeated, as if tasting it. That afternoon, Leah sat in her car, windows up, parked on the street 1 block over from the Holt house. The rain had paused, but clouds still hung like lead over Bend. She tapped her screen and hit submit. Within seconds, escrow documents and wiring instructions were filed. The buyers had sent the full earnest deposit. Inspection scheduled. Closing clock ticking. Everything was sealed under Leah's private channel. No signposts. No online footprint. No digital scent. She texted Maggie a single word. Done. Maggie replied, Good. Quiet is working. Back in the guest house, Maggie deleted the message chain immediately. She picked up the same roll of packing tape she'd used earlier, but paused as a knock sounded on the front door. Not Toby. Too heavy. She opened it to find her neighbor, Denise. Early 70s. Thick glasses. Sharper than she looked. She held a canvas tote filled with fall leaves and mail. Hey, Maggie. Meant to drop this off earlier. Postman left it in our box again. Thanks, Denise. Denise lingered. Saw a truck idling out front the other day. Movers? Maggie blinked once, then smiled. Something like that. Denise tilted her head, sensing the dodge. Everything okay over here? Maggie didn't miss a beat. I have a change coming. That's all. Denise seemed to study her. Well, I hope it's a change you picked. Maggie held her gaze. It is now. As Denise left, Maggie shut the door and stood for a long moment, hand resting on the handle. Her world was shrinking room by room, but it wasn't collapse. It was a deliberate unraveling, a controlled demolition. She walked to the back window. The kitchen blinds in the main house were still open. Tina was laughing into her phone, wine glass in hand, likely describing her latest renovation dreams to someone who didn't care. On Maggie's phone, another text arrived. You're being watched. No name, no punctuation, just that cold clarity again. Maggie turned, heart beating faster now, not from fear, but from focus. She crossed the room, reached under her desk drawer, and pulled out the cheap plastic toolkit Evan had left behind last year when installing curtain rods. She hadn't touched it since. She unscrewed the faceplate on the electrical socket nearest the window, and behind it, taped crudely into the drywall, was a tiny square device blinking red, a hidden camera. The pounding came hard and fast, sharp fists against the thin wood of the guesthouse door, no attempt at civility. Mom! Maggie calmly placed the screwdriver back into the toolkit, closed the lid, and rose. She didn't rush. Open the damn door! When she finally did, Evan stood there, rain-spattered, hair uncombed, and waving a crumpled letter that had clearly just been ripped open with the same fury he was now radiating. The official seal from the escrow office was still visible, torn halfway down the page. "What is this?" he barked, jabbing the letter toward her chest. "Are you selling my house?" Maggie didn't flinch. She stepped back with the quiet composure of someone opening a courtroom door, not a guest house. "Come in, Evan," she said. "Let's not yell in the yard." He stormed past her, dripping water onto her floor like a broken pipe. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "Unbelievable." "A goddamn betrayal." Maggie shut the door behind him with care. "Would you like to sit?" "I'd like an explanation." She gestured toward the table where the deed folder was already laid open, neat and waiting. "Then start with reading." Evan's eyes snapped to the document. His mouth moved, stuttering over legalese and bolded type. "This is the deed transfer we signed when you gave us the house," she said. "Remember that? Estate planning, you called it." He didn't look up. "And right there," she continued, pointing to the section highlighted in soft pencil, "you'll see I retained a life estate, which means I didn't give you the house. I gave you future ownership. Conditional. Posthumous." Evan looked up, eyes wide and raw. "You're twisting this." "No," she said, voice calm. "I'm clarifying it. You didn't read the fine print. You signed what I edited." He opened his mouth again, then closed it. The air in the room thickened. "That wasn't the intent," he finally muttered. "You said you were giving it to us. You said it would be ours." Maggie folded her arms, expression ironed flat. "Intent doesn't hold in court, Evan. Paper does." He stared at her, chest heaving. "So what now? You're what? Just kicking us out? Is that the plan? Selling it from under us?" "I'm selling what's mine," she said, "and I'm giving you 30 days to vacate. Just like any tenant." His head jerked as if slapped. "We're your family." "So was I," she said, "but you made me a guest." He stepped back, one hand raking through his damp hair. The fire was draining out of him now, replaced with something smaller, harder to name. "You could have talked to me." "I did," she said. "For years. You just stopped listening the moment you got a deed." He opened his mouth, but nothing came. The guest house seemed to shrink around them. Tight walls, short ceilings, a space built for silence. Maggie watched him like a hawk on a branch. Steady, sharp, unbothered by noise. At last he lowered the letter, fingers wrinkling its corners. "Who told you to do this?" he asked. "Frank? Leah?" She raised an eyebrow. "Is that your defense? Blaming the people who still return my calls?" Evan's phone buzzed. He checked it instinctively. His face changed. "Tina." Texting in all caps. "What is this escrow notice in my email? Why didn't you tell me?" His lips parted slightly. She just saw it." Maggie stepped toward the door and opened it for him. "I'd start packing," she said. It'll make the next conversation easier. Evan didn't move. Not yet. But it's not even on the market, he said, confused. We didn't see a listing. No sign. Maggie held his gaze. You never saw me either. Not really. He walked out wordlessly. Maggie shut the door behind him, slow and deliberate. She walked back to the outlet, picked up the small blinking camera, and crushed it between the jaws of the toolkit pliers with one clean squeeze. Plastic cracked. The red light blinked once more, and died. Frank Coulter's voice was slow and measured, like someone steering a plane through turbulence he'd flown through 100 times. Evan, this isn't the time to posture. I'm not posturing, Evan snapped over the phone. I'm telling you this is fraud. You're telling me, a licensed elder law attorney who oversaw the transfer, that your mother committed fraud against a deed you signed with full knowledge and zero duress? She tricked us. Frank paused. No, Evan, she edited a contract. You signed it. Evan paced across the upstairs hallway of the main house, shoulders tight, fingers white around his phone. You're siding with her. I'm siding with the law, Frank said. Which, I might add, she happens to understand better than you ever did. I'd tread carefully. You can't win this. You don't even have standing. The line went dead before Evan could answer. He flung the phone onto the entryway table. It bounced off the family photo frame and landed face down, like it had given up too. Within the hour, Tina was on Facebook. She didn't name names. Of course not. That wasn't her style. Instead, she posted a smiling selfie with a caption in bold font over a background of tasteful sage green. Just a reminder, blood isn't thicker than narcissism. She's track boundaries. A string of sympathy comments followed. Friends from yoga, from wine clubs, from curated digital circles who had no clue who the villain really was. Maggie didn't see the post. She never used Facebook. But Leah did. She screenshotted it, sent it to Maggie with a single comment. She's spiraling. Maggie didn't reply. She was folding linens when the message came through. A few minutes later, a new one buzzed in. Buyers ready to close early. They're asking if we can bump the date. Maggie stared at the message, then typed back. Yes. Let's end it sooner. 2 days later, Maggie walked into Frank's office wearing her charcoal wool coat and the scarf her husband had bought her on their last vacation. She signed the closing documents without ceremony, flipping each page like turning chapters she'd already read. Frank watched her. You okay? I expected rage from Evan, she said. But silence feels colder. Frank slid the documents into a thick manila envelope and sealed it. Sometimes silence is the sound of someone realizing they lost. She nodded, then stood. That's fine. I didn't sell it for applause. That evening, Maggie returned to the guest house, poured herself a cup of chamomile tea, and resumed packing. She was midway through wrapping her wedding china when she noticed something sticking out from the mailbox outside her door. A card. No envelope. She stepped outside and retrieved it. A simple white thank you note, plain block print on the front. Inside, a message in shaky teenage handwriting. Thanks for seeing me. I hope wherever you go, you don't feel small. T, no signature. Just that lone initial. She stood there in the doorway for a long moment, thumb brushing the edge of the card. Then she folded herself into the love seat, card still in hand, and let the tears come. Not loud, not messy. Just a quiet ache spilling out after too many days of staying composed. She cried like someone had called her by her first name after years of being invisible. She cried until the kettle whistled dry behind her. Then she wiped her face, got up, and packed another box. At midnight, her phone buzzed again. Not a text. A photo. A grainy image of her and Leah, standing beside the garage the day of the walkthrough. Leah holding a tablet, Maggie in profile. The angle was distant, Hi. Taken from the main house. There was no message attached, just the photo. The wire hit Maggie's account at 9:12 a.m. on a gray, mist-soaked Monday. She sat at the guest house table, coffee cooling beside her, laptop open to her bank's dashboard. The numbers glowed. Final, firm, life-altering. The sale had closed. She exhaled, slow and deep, like someone surfacing after too long underwater. The money was hers. Every cent. Untouched. Unshared. Unreachable by Evan and Tina. She clicked the transfer tab and opened two tabs side by side. One led to a private scholarship trust, the other to the Ben Public Library Foundation. She didn't pause. To the trust she input. Beneficiary, Tobias Holt. Terms, education, housing, emergency medical. No early withdrawal. Trigger date, 25th birthday. Condition, no parental cosigners. To the library, she donated $40,000 anonymously. She typed the note in the memo field slowly, carefully, in memory of the years that built me. Then she closed the laptop. The light from the screen dimmed, leaving only the early gray fog outside her window and the hum of the mini fridge. Tina opened her inbox mid-morning, expecting a shipment confirmation or a brand partnership offer. Instead, she found an email from a name she didn't recognize. Pacific Title and Escrow. Subject line, closing confirmation, Holt property. Final funds dispersed. She read it twice, then screamed. Evan came running from the upstairs bathroom, towel around his waist. She sold it, Tina shrieked, phone in one hand, the other clenched in a fist. It's done. It's done. It's all gone. Evan grabbed the phone, reading the screen with wide eyes. His mouth opened, then closed like a man realizing the punch had landed 5 seconds ago. But we're supposed to inherit it. Supposed to? It's gone, Evan. You told me she couldn't sell it. She wasn't supposed to, he muttered. There wasn't a listing. It wasn't online. How? Tina's hands were shaking. Check the bank. Maybe it's an escrow. He logged in. Nothing. No pending transfers. No beneficiary deposits. No settlement documentation. Nothing under either of their names. Just absence. Maggie didn't answer when they called. She didn't flinch when they knocked on the main house door, or when Tina shouted her name across the yard. She wasn't in the guest house. She was already gone. By the time Leah called to confirm the check had cleared and the title had been legally recorded, Maggie was standing in front of a weathered coastal condo near Yakuts, Oregon. The front porch faced a horizon that belonged to no one. The condo was modest, but filled with light. Hardwood floors, skylights, the faint, briny breath of salt air. She held the keys in her hand like a trophy no one had seen her earn. Leah's voice crackled through the line. It's done. Maggie nodded. I know. Thank you. There was a pause, then a tone shift. By the way, Leah said, Tina emailed me. Maggie turned away from the sea and sat on the porch railing. Let me guess. This feels illegal? She actually wrote that verbatim. Maggie smiled. And what did you say? I said, it's airtight. The title's clean. The sale is irrevocable. Then I stopped replying. Good. She won't take silence well. She never did. Tina stormed through the kitchen like a caged cat, slamming cupboards, muttering curses. She turned her ring around on her finger as if it, too, had betrayed her. Evan sat at the dining table, face pale, staring at the listing photo he hadn't seen until now, the one Leah had taken for her private network. A bright, wide-angle shot of his kitchen. Maggie's touch still in the window valances. He looked up at Tina, eyes hollow. She took everything. No, Tina said, throwing open the fridge. She stole it. You can't steal what you already own, Evan said quietly. Tina froze, turned, and glared at him like he'd just spoken in tongues. What? Evan shook his head. Forget it. She didn't. She opened Facebook, typed out a new post. Funny how some people think being clever replaces being kind. Spoiler? It doesn't. Chai, narcissists, never win. But they do ruin everything. She stared at it, then deleted it. Back at the coast, Maggie unpacked her art supplies and laid out 3 clean canvases across her sun-drenched dining table. Each one labeled in pencil on the back. Guesthouse paper, silence. She picked up a brush. The envelope landed with a soft thud against the polished marble countertop. Unassuming, almost gentle. Tina opened it over a half-finished smoothie bowl. Her spoon clattered into the sink seconds later. Evan. He looked up from his laptop, still scanning real estate forums for clues on how a house could vanish without ever hitting Zillow. She handed him the paper, eyes wide. She gave us notice. He read the page. Once. Twice. Notice to vacate. 30 days issued by life estate holder and legal seller, Margaret E. Holt, effective immediately upon receipt. Tina's voice cracked. We didn't say for a deposit. Evan didn't respond. He was rereading the small paragraph that outlined the legal authority backing the notice. Frank's name was on the letterhead. Tina sat down hard at the island, hands cradling her temples. We can't afford to buy something new and move. We just installed the custom blinds. Evan folded the notice, then unfolded it, as if doing so might change the outcome. She can't just kick us out, Tina said, desperation rising. There's got to be a loophole. We have a child. We have a guest house, Evan muttered, voice like gravel. Tina snapped her head toward him. That's what she lived in, he said. A guest house. No laundry, no insulation, no privacy. So now what? You're siding with her again? No, he said flatly. I'm just finally listening. Back on the coast, Maggie rolled another painting into a protective tube. Her fingers moved with quiet purpose, measured, steady, exact. The moving truck was scheduled for Friday. Not hers, theirs. She'd booked it herself. It would show up on time, on their curb, in broad daylight. Leah had offered to handle it all, but Maggie wanted it visible, public, inevitable. She tucked the notice receipt into a labeled file folder. Final correspondence, 3058 Willow Ridge. Her new address was written in neat ink on a return label. 12 Fern Bay Lane, Unit 3, Yakats. OR. She looked up as her phone buzzed. Text from buyer. Hi, Maggie. Just wanted to say, can't wait to move in. Your place is beautiful. We left you a little something for when you're back in town next week. Attached, a photo of a bottle of Oregon Pinot Noir and a handwritten card that read, Welcome to the next chapter. Maggie smiled. 30 miles away, in Bend, Evan stood in the hallway outside Toby's room. He knocked once. Can I come in? Toby looked up from his laptop. Sure. Evan stepped inside, glanced around the space he barely remembered decorating. Movie posters, a guitar stand, books still in stacks on the floor. We're going to have to move, Evan said. Toby blinked. Yeah. I figured. It's complicated. Toby nodded, then stood. Walked over to his bookshelf, picked up a framed photo of him and Maggie from 2 years ago, before the brunches, before the boxes. He looked at his dad. I want to help her, Toby said quietly. Load the truck. Say goodbye. Evan's face tightened. You're choosing her over us? Toby shook his head. No, I'm choosing what's right. He walked out before Evan could reply. 3 days later, Maggie stood on the front porch of her old home, now legally someone else's. The moving truck idled in the driveway. Evan and Tina hadn't spoken to her directly since the notice. They hovered inside, visible through the front window, packing boxes clumsily, tension thick in every movement. Toby walked up the sidewalk carrying a small cooler. I brought iced tea, he said. Thought we might get thirsty. Maggie smiled. I'd be honored. They worked together for the next hour, loading what few things she still had stored in the garage, some art supplies, an old trunk she hadn't trusted to movers. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. When they were done, Maggie turned to him. Thank you. He looked at her with a softness that felt older than 16. I saw you. I always did. She kissed his forehead. Then she climbed into the passenger seat of the truck. The engine rumbled to life. Evan appeared at the door just in time to watch it pull away. He didn't wave. She didn't look back. The coastal air was different. Thicker. Quieter. Older somehow. It moved like memory. Soft. Persistent. Impossible to ignore. Maggie turned the key and stepped into the condo. It smelled faintly of salt, cedar, and fresh paint. The walls were buttercream white, the floors warm oak. Sea light spilled across the open-plan space like it belonged there. She dropped her keys in a ceramic dish by the door and exhaled. Deep, long, the kind of breath that doesn't come unless the weight behind it is finally gone. The living room was simple. A two-seater couch, an armchair by the bay window, and a round table with 2 chairs facing the sea. The movers had already unloaded her boxes. Everything labeled, nothing broken. The chaos was gone. All that remained was arrangement. She walked barefoot through the hallway to the back of the unit, the studio. It had high ceilings, a skylight. The far wall was a window tall enough to make the ocean feel like a painting hung just for her. In the corner, her easel stood waiting. She hadn't painted in 6 years. She opened the window. Seagulls echoed in the distance. The tide moved in and out like a breath she didn't have to control. She unpacked slowly, deliberately. Brushes first, then tubes of oil paint wrapped in linen. She placed them on the table like instruments before surgery. She ran her hand along the blank canvas already mounted on the easel. No title, no pressure, just space. Back in the kitchen, she plugged in her laptop and opened her browser. Logged into the donation site she'd bookmarked the day after escrow closed. Create Memorial Fund name, James Holt Veterans Arts Scholarship. Purpose: supporting retired servicemen and women exploring visual arts. She uploaded a photo, James, smiling in uniform, paint-streaked hands holding a mug of coffee in their old backyard. She stared at it for a long time before typing the dedication. In memory of the one who saw me first, and never stopped. She hit submit. The confirmation email landed instantly. She moved it to a folder labeled Legacy. Next, she opened a blank message. To Leah Ramirez, subject. We did it. Body. I'm here. The light's good. It's quiet enough to matter. Thank you for never seeing me as small. Let me know if you're ever passing through. I owe you coffee and the best view on the coast. She clicked send, then clicked again, this time on a stationary site. Customize letterhead. Name, M. Holt subhead, Coastal Living, Fern Bay, Oregon font, Garamond, italic. Paper. Ivory linen, 50 sheets. Under add personal note, she typed, no return to sender. She poured herself a glass of white wine and took it to the porch. The horizon was draped in lavender dusk. A fishing boat floated past the break, its lights blinking like Morse code. Her phone vibrated. She considered not checking it, but she did. Text from unknown number. You won. But don't think it's over. She stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then she set it down, opened her notebook, wrote a new title at the top of the page. The Goodbye I Didn't Give. Underneath it, a single sentence. Some people don't deserve your last word. Silence is louder. She closed the notebook, walked back inside, and picked up her brush. Maggie didn't reply. Not to the message, not to the implication, not to the weight behind it. Instead, she placed her phone face down on the dresser, slipped on a windbreaker, and walked outside barefoot, shoes dangling from her hand like an afterthought. The sand was cool and damp, pressed flat by last night's tide. Her feet left clean, deliberate prints as she walked along the water's edge. The ocean breathed steadily beside her. No drama, no performance, just presence. She didn't bring her notebook. Not this time. Instead, she let the morning write itself. Gulls circled above like punctuation marks. Driftwood marked the curve of the beach like old bones, washed smooth by time. She stopped once to watch a father and daughter collect shells, their laughter soft against the wind. He looked up and nodded politely. Maggie nodded back. No one here knew her. No legacy. No war stories from the guest house. No family tension riding on every interaction. Just the simplicity of anonymity, a clean sheet. When she returned, she wrote in her journal for the first time in months, not in reaction to anyone, not to defend or explain. She titled the page, Chapter 2. Then began, "This life is mine. It's not loud, but it's mine." That Thursday, she walked into the Fern Bay Community Center for the weekly poetry group. Folding chairs, bad coffee, the scent of rain on sweaters and ink on paper. She wasn't sure if she belonged, and for once, she didn't overthink it. When it was her turn, she stood. The moderator, a woman in her 60s with a braid like a rope and readers sliding down her nose, asked, "Name?" Just that. No title, no context, no lineage. Maggie smiled. Just Maggie. The room nodded. That was enough. She read a short piece she'd written on the back of a grocery list, something about the sound of sea foam and how it reminded her of promises people made when they weren't planning to keep them. When she sat down, the man beside her whispered, "That was real." She whispered back, "So was the grocery list." He laughed, and that was it. No one asked what she used to do. Or who she used to be. They only asked if she was coming next week. She said she would. 2 weeks later, she stood in front of a small group of adults at the local library. Her first writing workshop since Bend. The flyer had been pinned to a corkboard, "Writing Through Transition with M. Holt, Thursdays at 6 p.m. 10 people showed up. Retirees, mothers, one ex-line cook, a teenager with a spiral notebook covered in stickers. No one with polished bios, no one expecting hers. She started the session with a prompt. Write the sentence no one believed when you said it. By the end, the room was full of scratched paper, soft tears, and small laughter. Stories surfaced like old coins, things held too long in the dark. Maggie didn't lead with lessons. She asked questions. Listened. Let them feel what they needed to feel. It turned out she hadn't lost her editor's touch, only her need to explain it. Sunday morning, she walked to the small flower market on 2nd Street. She paused at a bunch of yellow tulips, then shifted to a wild arrangement of eucalyptus and cream dahlias. A woman beside her smiled. Gift? Maggie turned, considered the question. Yes, she said, for someone who finally did what she said she would. The woman smiled again, not understanding but accepting. Maggie carried the bouquet home in both arms like it might fly away if she let go. She placed it in a cobalt vase on her dining table, right beneath the window, where the ocean would see it first. She made tea, opened the notebook again. New page, new title, The Pride They Didn't Know. She wrote, "They thought my silence meant shame. It didn't. It meant I was finally done auditioning for love I'd already earned." She didn't hear from Evan that week. She didn't need to. But she did receive one thing, a padded envelope in the mailbox. Return address, no name, Bend, Oregon. Inside, a black and white photograph, Toby and Maggie on moving day, taped to the back, a note in teenage scrawl. For when you forget what you changed. Maggie sat down, pressed the photo flat, and stared at it under the afternoon sun. No words this time, just a smile, the kind that didn't need to be seen to be real. The attorney's office smelled of dry paper and ocean air drifting through a cracked window. A gull shrieked somewhere outside, but inside it was still, the kind of stillness that made pens sound louder against legal pads. Maggie sat at the polished oak table opposite a new face. Lydia Chan, JD, Estate Law. Frank had recommended her after stepping back from private practice. Lydia's voice was soft, precise, and free of small talk. "Everything's drafted per your instructions," Lydia said, sliding a thin folder toward her. "All we need are your initials and signatures." Maggie glanced at the first page. Last Will and Testament, Margaret E. Holt. Her hands didn't tremble. Not once. The condo. The royalties from her editorial years. The little she had saved from quiet investments. All of it listed line by line, like beads on a string she'd been gathering for decades. She turned the page. Under beneficiary for her primary residence, she read, Trustee, Tobias Holt distribution date, 25th birthday restrictions, for education, housing, and creative development. She kept reading. Donations to the library, the Veterans Arts Scholarship she'd already seeded, a stipend for the local writing program she'd begun teaching at. No mention of Evan, no mention of Tina, no letters, no explanations, just clean, binding decisions. "They won't be able to contest it?" she asked quietly. Lydia shook her head. "You've structured it as an irrevocable trust and funded it now. When you pass, it simply changes title. They'd have no standing." Maggie nodded. "Good." She flipped to the last page and signed with her familiar neat print. Margaret E. Holt. The pen scratched like a small final verdict. She initialed each margin where Lydia had placed a discreet tab. When she was done, Lydia gathered the pages into a blue binder. "You've built something for him," she said gently. "It's rare to see that kind of clarity." Maggie looked out the window at the strip of sky beyond the street. "I'm not punishing the wrong person," she murmured. "I'm just not rewarding the ones who mistook my silence for surrender." Lydia slid over a small envelope. "We'll file this today. Here's your copy. Keep it somewhere safe." Maggie tucked it into her leather bag. "It already is." That evening, she walked the beach again, but slower this time, as if the tide might read her new secret and drag it away. She thought of Toby's photograph, the one he'd sent without explanation. For when you forget what you changed. She wouldn't forget. Back at the condo, she sat at the dining table with her new stationery. Ivory linen, Garamond italic, M. Holt, Coastal Living. She smoothed one sheet flat and picked up a pen. Not to Evan, not to Tina, to Toby. She wrote only, "Happy birthday," no signature, no return address. Then she reached for a second, smaller slip of paper and wrote in block print, "Careful and even. Always remember who saw you." She folded it inside the card, sealed the envelope, and affixed a single seashell sticker where a signature might have gone. She addressed it to the P.O. box she'd quietly rented for him through a friend. She paused a moment, pen resting against her lip, then added nothing more. No explanations, no justifications, just the seed of a future where he could step free of their shadow. At the same hour in Bend, Evan scrolled aimlessly through old bank statements, reading and rereading lines he couldn't change. Tina had retreated to the bedroom, phone glowing as she scrolled social media, looking for validation that wouldn't come. On the kitchen counter sat a pile of unopened mail, bills, circulars, and a brightly colored card addressed to Toby. He picked it up, frowned, and set it aside. He didn't open it. He never asked. Maggie walked out onto her porch with a mug of tea. The night was clear, the sky salted with stars. She could almost feel the paper of the will in her bag still warm from her hand. She whispered to no one, "It's done." Her easel waited inside. The canvas was no longer blank. She had brushed the first color across it, a pale seagrass green, a base layer for whatever came next. She dipped the brush again and dragged it across. Slow, deliberate, like crossing something off a list. Her phone buzzed on the windowsill. A new text. No number. No name. You're rewriting history, but history remembers its own. She stared at the screen. The sound of the tide filled the silence. Then she set the phone down and picked up the brush again. The months drifted by like sea mist, gentle, slow, and without announcement. Autumn turned to early spring on the Oregon coast. Fern Bay bloomed in the shy, salt-fed way it always did. Daffodils between sidewalk cracks, morning fog clinging like a shawl across rooftops, fishermen's boots lined up outside porches like punctuation marks to stories half told. Maggie stopped marking time in days. She started counting by brush strokes. There had been no word from Evan, no emails, no calls, no tantrums disguised as pleas, not even a misdirected legal notice trying to claw at the edges of what was already settled. Tina, predictably, had vanished behind her own narrative, Facebook still active, still curated, still full of brunch photos and bitterness in passive voice. But the silence no longer frightened Maggie. It steadied her. She found herself waking before dawn without an alarm. No one needed her up. No one was waiting. Her body simply moved toward the day as if it finally believed it was safe to. She sipped her tea at the window each morning. The ocean was her companion now. Not dramatic, not demanding. Just present. By April, her studio had begun to smell like linseed oil and lavender again. Sunlight poured in through the skylight like a promise kept. She'd finished 3 paintings, each one small, quiet, unshowy. A chipped blue teacup resting on a windowsill. A set of shelves, slightly crooked, filled with books no one had dusted in years. A single bare light bulb hanging from a low ceiling, casting soft halos on wood-paneled walls. She called the series Guesthouse Gratitude. Not out of irony, but out of reclamation. What had once held her in, quiet, cold, forgotten, had also taught her to survive without permission. The Fern Bay Art Co-op took all 3 pieces. Her first local exhibit went up in May. It wasn't a glamorous gallery. Just a corner space next to the antique shop and the bakery that sold coffee so strong it made poets loud. But the walls were white and wide, and the frames sat with the quiet authority of things made with care. Maggie didn't stand next to her paintings during the show's opening. She wandered the edges of the room, listening. She heard someone say, "It's so still, but there's weight in it, like something happened here." And later, from a younger woman in denim overalls, "There's sadness, but also defiance?" Maggie smiled to herself. Let them guess. That, too, was a kind of freedom. Toward the end of the evening, a man with salt-streaked hair and kind eyes approached her. He stood in front of the painting of the crooked bookshelf for a long while before turning. "Is that based on a true story?" he asked. Maggie considered her answer carefully. She could have said no. Could have said yes. Could have told him about the brunches, the boxes, the betrayal coded in silence. Instead, she smiled. "Let's just say," she said, "it's no fiction." The man nodded, satisfied with her restraint. He didn't ask more. People here rarely did. Small towns had a way of understanding that stories weren't always for public archive. That night she returned to her condo barefoot, as always. She set a fresh bouquet, white freesia and dusty blue thistle, in the same cobalt vase by the window. The tide was out, the stars sharp. A boat blinked somewhere in the distance, making no sound but leaving a trace. She lit a single candle by the easel, just one. It was enough. Her phone buzzed once from the entry table. She didn't move to check it. Not yet. Instead, she sat down and opened her notebook to a fresh page. She titled it, "The Piece I Didn't Owe," then paused. For a long moment she just listened, to the quiet, to her heartbeat, to the absence of needing to prove anything to anyone anymore. Finally, she wrote, "I didn't steal anything. I reclaimed what was already mine, and gave it back to myself with interest." She closed the notebook and finally reached for her phone. A single message. Unknown number. It read, "You think this is the end." She stared at it, then turned off her phone. The candle flickered, caught in the draft of the open window, and somewhere outside, the ocean kept breathing. Maggie stood in her small garden plot just past sunrise, fingers buried in the damp soil, tea cooling on the stone ledge beside her. The rosemary had taken root. The lavender was stretching toward the morning light. Nothing extravagant, just green things growing in peace. She wore her old flannel, sleeves rolled, knees pressed to the earth. There were no phone calls waiting, no doors creaking under someone else's permission. Just her, the wind, and the steady rhythm of tending something that didn't need to be won, only cared for. From the porch table, her mail sat in a tidy stack. Cable bill, local arts newsletter, and a thick envelope bearing the Bend Public Library's return address. She washed her hands and opened it slowly. Inside, a letter on cream-colored stationery. "Dear Ms. Holt, in recognition of your recent contribution and its anonymous historical match, the Board of Trustees has voted unanimously to name our renovated West Wing in honor of your late husband and your enduring belief in second chapters. It will read, the James and Margaret Holt Wing for Storytelling and Art. Please consider this a formal thank you. We'd love to host you at the opening, should you find yourself back in Bend. With gratitude, the Library Foundation." Maggie read it twice. Her lips pressed together, but she didn't cry. Instead, she set the letter down, picked up her tea, and walked barefoot across the wood deck, letting the morning wind lift the corners of her sleeves. Somewhere behind her, the ocean thudded its slow applause against the cliffs. At noon, Frank arrived. He stepped out of his rental car in pressed khakis and a cardigan, holding a bottle of white wine and a paper sack from the market. He looked older than the last time she'd seen him, but lighter, somehow. As if retirement had given him permission to exhale. "You've done well," he said, looking around. "I've done better," Maggie replied. They sat on the porch with sandwiches and wine in chipped mugs. He toasted her. "To clean exits," Frank said, raising his glass. Maggie's smile deepened. "To not settling for the guest house." He chuckled. "You know, I've had people threaten to revise their wills before, but I've never seen someone weaponize one like a scalpel." "It wasn't about hurting them," she said. "It was about stopping the bleeding." Frank nodded slowly. "Fair. And remarkably well stitched." They ate in companionable silence, watching a dog chase gulls down the shoreline like it had something to prove. Frank eventually stood and stretched. "Well, Margaret Holt, may the rest of your chapters be written in ink you chose." She walked him to the car, waved him off, then returned inside. As she closed the screen door, the wind picked up. The copper chimes she'd hung near the porch beams clinked to life, a melody made of scrap metal, sea air, and second chances. She paused there for a moment, one hand on the doorframe, eyes closed, letting it in, letting it all happen, without fight. Then she stepped back inside. The house smelled faintly of citrus and linseed oil. Her newest painting was still drying by the window, a portrait of a table set for one, full of light, untouched. On the kitchen counter sat her notebook. She opened it to the last page and, without hesitation, wrote, They offered me leftovers, so I sold the table. She closed the cover, poured the last of her tea down the sink, and ran the faucet until the cup was clean. No rage remained, no noise to answer, just her. A home built on clarity, and a view no one else had the right to name.